My point is you have to save the outrage, genuinely outrageous things. Otherwise, we all get fed up with the outrage.
But we're comparing him to Hitler.
You know what it's like to go to sleep every night knowing you work for a bunch of psychotic killers?
So let me go ahead and eviscerate this mouth diarrhea for you sentence by sentence.
Get off my phone!
Decency. Decency. Decency.
Need a break from the shouting? You've just found it. A haven from the noise. A safe space for ideas that aren't welcome in safe spaces. A game of chess in a world of socio-political rugby. You're listening to The Right Moment.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Right Moment. I am your host, Joel Curtinitis. How was your Thanksgiving? It's pretty good? Great? A little awkward? Maybe all of the above? I had a fantastic Thanksgiving. It was just an amazing time with family and food and football and all the things that Americans love about Thanksgiving. I mean, this is seriously one of the most American holidays, right? I mean, there's 4th of July with the fireworks and the history and the revolution and all that, and it's amazing. But I have to say the next most patriotic holiday has got to be Thanksgiving. And it's just the coolest time. It actually is my favorite holiday of the year. I like it better than Christmas. I like it better than anything else. And it has very little to do with the food or the football or the things that I've discussed. You know, my favorite thing about Thanksgiving as a whole is it's like the 1 week of the year, the week before Thanksgiving, or the time before Thanksgiving, is like the one time of year where people that are normally like habitual complainers, like sort of check themselves a little bit. Seriously, like I'm serious. Americans are the most complainy society. We are just covered in complaining all the time. It's on TV, it's on the radio. It's the basis for commercialism, right? I mean, everything in your life sucks. Everything's terrible. You need this new thing to make it right. You need this new relationship to make it right. There's just every problem that could possibly be had by a human being you have, right? So the one thing I love more than anything else about Thanksgiving is, you know, you have just a few days there where people, whether they're necessarily happy or not, doesn't mean they're just happy all the time, but they have this idea. There's this sort of unspoken idea that when you talk to people around Thanksgiving, like there's something inappropriate about complaining. I mean, you may not notice it. I mean, the principle doesn't change for the rest of the year. We shouldn't walk around complaining about everything. We have a lot to be thankful for. But around Thanksgiving, it just enters people's consciousness a little bit, whether you're at work or whether you're at home or whether you're, exchanging small talk with the cashier at the supermarket. I mean, people just have this attitude that, hey, there's a lot of good right now, and it's worth being thankful about. Now, that attitude is diminishing, and you see less and less of it every year. And I think part of that is because Thanksgiving is getting cannibalized by Black Friday. And this is like a serious pet peeve of mine. I wrote an article about it for The Blaze a couple of years ago called, where Black Friday isn't ruining Thanksgiving. We are. And because we are. We're just destroying Thanksgiving one bit at a time. And every year it seems like there's a little bit less Thanksgiving to celebrate. I joke with people about the fact that Thanksgiving is the Poland of the holiday world. There's this closet deal that was hatched by Halloween and Christmas to just divide it, and that seems to be what happens. I mean, you go through fall and you're enjoying all these holidays in the holiday season, and we get to the build up for Halloween, and there's so much to sell and so much to commercialize off of that, and then you get rid of the Halloween goods, and immediately it's Christmas. There's just Christmas instantly. There's no layover. There's no, hey, there's another holiday in between here and there. It just sort of happens. It's just Christmas up one side and down the other. And there's nothing wrong with Christmas. Okay, Christmas is awesome in its own way, but Thanksgiving is something different. Thanksgiving is something special, and Thanksgiving is supposed to be the time where we actually think about our blessings and we think about the things that we have that are good, the things that we're thankful for, and the more it's cannibalized by two highly, highly commercial holidays, the less that's going to exist. So one of the things that has always made it special to me a little bit is one of the first books that I ever had read to me when I was a kid. You want to talk about a nerd family? This is a pretty good qualifier right here. But one of the first books I ever had read to me by my parents was The Plymouth Settlement by William Bradford, or On Plymouth Plantation. of Plymouth Plantation. And it was a great account of not only the first Thanksgiving, but the context surrounding it that often gets left out of the Thanksgiving story. And that's really important to think about. The context in which the first Thanksgiving was held was not one of peace and plenty and comfort and iPhones. It was the context was these pilgrims came to the United States to not the popular tale is that they came to escape persecution, which is sort of loosely true in an indirect sense, but it's been pointed out by several folks, most notably recently by Ben Shapiro, that they were actually coming to the New World to protect their religious heritage. They had already escaped England. They'd been living in Holland for some time, and they were actually more concerned with the worldliness that was around them and losing their children to the culture that they were in. So they undertook this voyage to the New World as a pursuit of holiness more than an escape. But the first Thanksgiving followed on dire times where many of the settlers that came over starved to death. And if I remember the account right, I can't find any corroboration for this immediately online, but if I remember right, I remember Bradford writing that they had to post a guard over the cemetery because people were starving to death, and they were worried that folks would dig up the corpses and cannibalize them just to survive. I mean, that's the situation that they were dealing with in Plymouth. And so the first Thanksgiving is an incredible testament to the power of gratitude, the power of thanks, where the necessity that was upon these settlers to give thanks and to have a celebration for the good that they had, even after such incredibly mournful times that they had. They lost friends, they lost family, they lost people all over the place. But it was also the togetherness, of course, between the Native Americans and the settlers that came and settled down there. There was peace between them that lasted for years and years, decades after the first Thanksgiving. That peace was maintained through really a miraculous set of circumstances and some men whose characters were, beyond reproach. Some amazing selflessness and some amazing courage that's a part of that story. And of course, you can't bring up Thanksgiving and do it justice without discussing the fact that the early starving times that the Pilgrims faced, and much of the trouble that they faced in general, was due to their adherence to the philosophy of socialism. They got there with the charter that was given them to start a new colony, and that charter established a commune in Plymouth. The settlers were all to work equally and divide up the goods equally. It was the Plymouth Commune for all intent and purposes at that time. And Bradford and others have recorded the disaster that became, because people who, by all accounts, were hardworking, industrious, and decent and honest individuals suddenly became lazy and disinterested and relied on others to do the work for them, which is the natural tendency of socialism. I mean, this is the outworking that has been shown multiple times throughout history, and people just don't want to seem to learn from it. But their solution, the Pilgrims, to their credit, did learn from it, and their solution was to divide out the land and give people their own land to cultivate. And more or less immediately, they turned the colony around. The supplies produced went up. They had plenty of food. People were taking care of themselves, taking responsibility, and the colony flourished. So there's a lot more context that people have lost sight of. And the strange thing is, it was so natural to them to give thanks. It's like, hey, we had a good year. We have food again. People aren't dying. We should be thankful. We should have a feast and be thankful to God for this. But we don't have that instinct anymore. I mean, we just don't. We don't know who to be thankful to anymore. And that's a real problem, because without the concept of someone bigger than ourselves, we just become self-absorbed egomaniacs. And that's honestly what Black Friday is all about. It's not even about gifts anymore. It started out, it was supposed to be that Christmas shopping started on Black Friday, and people would go out and buy all their gifts, and there was a spike in sales and retail sales, and that was the story of Black Friday. But that's not what it is anymore. Now it is... man, it's depressing. It's depressing is what it is. If you watch the videos that people put out there, it's like a human zoo. People squishing each other to death on the doors of supermarkets waiting to get in to buy some new thing. And people have mourned this all over the place. There's plenty of articles written and plenty of hand-wringing about all the commercialization, but very few people are talking about the root cause. Why are we this way? Why are we like, hogs rushing to the trough? Why are people trampling each other to get a TV? That doesn't make any sense. Well, there's no gratitude. And that's become painfully evident. I mean, if you had to sit there and think of a way to undo Thanksgiving, like, okay, Thanksgiving is this time where we're supposed to be thankful and grateful and count our blessings. How can I undo that as quickly as possible? What would you do? Well, institute Black Friday, man, because that absolutely works. People immediately, like, the turkey hasn't even digested yet before people are browsing the ads looking for what they don't have that they need. And it's a shocking reversal. It's just a shocking reversal that you can have that change in your mindset. And, if there is no one greater than yourself, and if you are responsible for all of your success and all the good that is in your life, then yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you don't owe anyone gratitude. You don't owe anyone thanks. Maybe your parents, if you had a good family, maybe, a teacher or someone that helped you through here and there, other people. But certainly, especially if you don't consider yourself to be in a good and happy state right now, you have no reason to give thanks. And this is one of the byproducts of this nihilistic, God-hating society that we have now, where it's, even if you're not religious, and even if you're an atheist, this is one of the things that should bother you. And it bothered Nietzsche a lot, and he talked about this. He wrote about this often, which is, hey, we can kill God, sure, we can decide that there's no God and we can reject him and all that. But what we're left with is a moral vacuum where there's nothing greater than ourselves. Not only are we now, all powerful as human beings, but we are responsible for everything. How now do we act? How now do we decide what is important and who we are as people and what to be thankful for and what not to be thankful for? What we're responsible for and what is the product of chance. All of these things are questions that come with abandoning a worldview that incorporates theism. I mean, if you believe in God, then you always have a reason to be thankful because you're not in control. So there's reason to take responsibility because of the things that we can change, but there is always a way to look around you and say, hey, I had no way to choose where I was born. I had no way to choose who my parents were. I had no way to choose how healthy I would be or what my mental capacities would be. These are not things that I had any power over, and I am supremely and eternally thankful for these things, even if nothing else. And that worldview is diminishing. That worldview is going away, and that's why we see the rise of hyper-commercialization. That's where we see these holidays getting torn to pieces by people who are not interested in giving, are not interested in being thankful. They're just interested in getting the next toy. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with, you want to go shopping, go shopping. Sure, you want to take advantage of a sale, take advantage of a sale. But the mindset, I think we need to pay careful attention because a lot of times we only look at these large, society-wide shifts in behavior, and that's what distresses us. But really what we ought to be looking at is the things that cause that. Like what is the logical process that led people to become, consumer frenzy on Black Friday? I mean, what brought this into play? And there's a lot of ways to blame different people and different activities or the companies for commercializing the crap out of everything and setting up Santa decorations in September. I mean, there's a lot of directions you could go with it, right? But we, as individuals and as Americans, we have the ability to turn that back around. We have the ability to make it what it was intended to be. We have the ability to be thankful, and that's powerful. Being thankful, this is one of those keys that you don't hear many people talk about, okay? But being thankful is a cure for a whole lot of evil. It is. I mean, it's not just your general, malaise and inadequacy that being thankful can solve. I mean, it can being thankful, it makes you unafraid. It makes you courageous. It makes you happy. It makes you whole. It makes you care. It makes you generous. Because you look around and you see what other people don't have as you're looking at what you do have. There's so many things that come from being thankful, and it is among the prime virtues. And we can't let go of that, and that's anybody as a society, even if you don't accept God, You should be able to see that. You've got to be able to see the necessity of being thankful that we have as humans. It's just incredibly important. So, we have another year again before this rolls back around, and I would just throw a challenge out there. Bring that attitude with you. It doesn't have to stay with Thanksgiving. You can be thankful all the time and watch people change around you. When you're at work and people are complaining about, oh, this project's going terrible and I don't know what to do with this, just talk about it from a different point of view. Just bring up, hey, this, it could be a lot worse than this. We could be a lot further behind than we are. And, this guy's really done a great job of pitching in. So I think we ought to be thankful for that. There's always a different way to look at it. And I think that especially as Americans, especially with the constant drive to get more and acquire more and have more, that counterweight has to be there. The counterbalance has to be there to give thanks for the things that we have, to recognize the blessings that we have, and try to help bring that same happiness and bring that same contentment to others. It's something that can really make a difference in American culture and have implications, I think, far beyond what a whole lot of other, virtuous vagaries and self-help books can possibly do. I mean, this is something that it's transformative in its ability to take culture and turn it from a culture of need into a culture of blessing. So that's something that we can work on. What's one thing that we should be seriously thankful for, since we're talking about Thanksgiving? I mean, there's one thing that we can be seriously thankful for, and that's the internet. And so, after the break, we're going to talk about one issue capable of uniting authoritarian lefties with Reddit neckbeards, and that's net neutrality. Hang on, we'll be right back. You're listening to The Right Moment. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Right Moment. I am your host, Joel Kurtnitis. Let's talk about net neutrality. I was really into the whole net neutrality debate a couple years ago when the policy first got implemented under the Obama administration. Now there's been an administration change. Trump's FCC chair, Ajit Pai, I hope I'm saying that right, is set to repeal it. And the vote on that will be held, I believe, December 16th. A lot of people are freaking out about it. It's going to kill the internet. Your freedom is going to be over. You're going to be a slave, and it's going to be horrible, and the internet's going to die. Okay, there's a lot of melodrama around this issue. But can we be honest about what it is and just talk about it? So if you ask one side, the pro-net neutrality side, you will hear that it is just a fairness principle. That's it. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Everybody wants to be fair. So it's just a fairness principle saying that internet service providers should not be able to speed up or slow down or block your internet service based upon what content you might be using. Now, if you ask the other side, the side that is generally against net neutrality, they will tell you that there are two parts to this. And those two parts would be, one, a fairness principle that is discussed as net neutrality, and then a government takeover scheme of sorts that goes by the moniker of Title II reclassification, to be more specific. There are two components to this. I mean, there really are. So people talk about the principle of net neutrality, but there's no disputing that, right? And that's why the language has tilted in their favor. People that are talking about net neutrality are like, oh, who would want to be against fairness? Don't you want your internet service provider to be fair and let you have access to all the things that you want to look at? Okay, nobody is arguing that. Everybody wants their service to be fair and unbiased and transparent and fair pricing and all of those things, right? But that's not what's under dispute here. So the principle of net neutrality doesn't actually have any teeth. The principle has been in practice for a long time now, for years and years. The internet's been around for like 20 years. And the reason that there's been only a handful of cases of content-based throttling and speed differentials and blocks and things like that are that it's bad business. I mean, there's no reason for companies to do this because it's bad business. If you piss off your consumers, they go to another service provider and you're out of luck. So this is how businesses survive. So what the Title II reclassification means is based upon the hypothetical that we think businesses are evil and they want to limit your internet and they want to do all these things to you and they want to harm your internet experience and take over because they're evil, bloodthirsty corporations. Okay. Net neutrality is the public face of that. Here's what they really want to do, okay? The Title II reclassification takes broadband providers and internet service providers and places them, by places them, I mean forcibly grabs them by the hair and drags them, under the Title II provisions of the 1934 Telecommunications Act. I say that again, the 1934 Telecommunications Act. This is an FDR-era act that was passed basically to protect people from Ma Bell, and it's being used to take control of the internet. So internet service providers would then, under Title II, be classified as common carriers, which is analogous to a public utility. I don't know about you. I don't like dealing with utilities. A utility is another term for a government-enforced monopoly. That's what it is. People are so worried about, well, the internet's going to be monopolized by these companies, but it's not a monopoly. There are a ton of providers out there right now. I've got like 5 of them in my area I can choose from, and there should be more. Okay, don't get me wrong. There should be more. The competition would blow this market wide open. It would be a great thing, and that's a whole different discussion. But it's not a monopoly. Now, if they're reclassified under Title II, they will be a monopoly. That's the irony of this whole thing. Is the messaging is these evil companies are trying to form a monopoly, and they're going to do what they want, and they're going to screw the consumer. So to fix that, let's give the monopoly to government instead, who will then turn around and deputize these companies that we don't trust. And where's the logic in that? Hey, we don't trust Verizon to do the right thing, so we're going to make Verizon a para-government entity that is now under government supervision and has sole rights to do whatever they want. So, I mean, that's really what's at stake here. And there's a couple perspectives that you need to look at this from, okay? I understand there is an argument on both sides of this, okay? And there's an argument on both sides of every utility discussion. I just happen to fall on the side that says utility is bad, free market is good, and I would rather have choices and be able to customize what I want rather than just having somebody spoon feed it to me as a here's what you need, this is all you asked for, it's a basic human right. I'm not interested in that. So the couple of perspectives that you have to look at this from, though, the first one is the consumer. And a lot of people kind of look at it from this way, okay, is the consumer going to be better or worse off for net neutrality? Now, you have to keep in mind that this includes consumers from, me producing content right now and distributing that to Netflix, who is, blowing up all over the place, and they're sending millions and millions of gigs all over, okay? We're both consumers. So saying, is it going to be better for the consumer? Well, it depends on what the consumer is after. If it's the little guy and you want to lower your costs or have more customization or flexibility, then you don't want net neutrality, right? Because net neutrality says you have to have a single price for a single package with everything. Okay, well, suppose I can't afford everything. Suppose I can't do $79 a month for the whole package, and I only use Netflix. So I really only want a movie streaming option that should only cost me like $20, right? Okay, well, you can't do that. After this is reclassified, you can't do that. That takes away the option of you negotiating that contract with your provider because they don't care what you want. They're a utility now. Now, from the other side of the consumer perspective is companies like Netflix or like Amazon, who do huge amounts of traffic through these internet service providers, and they get a break with net neutrality, right? Because they should be paying more based on how much business they're doing and how much content they're distributing, but they don't under this. If you classify this utility and you put the service out there, it then becomes I can stream movies or I can email spreadsheets and I get the same thing. Well, that's not really fair. And a great analogy I've heard on this is someone was discussing, why don't we go for truck neutrality next, right? I mean, the roads are paid for by the government. The infrastructure is already there. So why do we charge semi-drivers and trucking companies more in licenses and fees? Why do we have to weigh them? Why do we have a separate process established for them? Well, because they're using it more, right? They're getting more out of it. They're basically consuming a lot more from the same service than other people are. So we have established a different norm for them to go through. Okay, so imagine if you're pursuing truck neutrality. Now all of a sudden we all have the same tags and titles and all that. All the fees are the same. All the costs are the same for me as it is for the trucking company down the road from me. Well, again, fair in that case depends on your perspective. Is it really? And so that's where the consumer, the large scale consumer, is definitely in favor of this, because for them it means that it puts them in the driver's seat and their costs stay low. Nobody can look at them and say, okay, you're doing something different, so we're going to charge people differently. No, it's not that way. So they are the big winners out of this. And when people talk about the corporations being against it, you really ought to look at content delivery as well. They have a stake in this, and these are in many instances much larger companies. So, but the second perspective you need to look at is from the perspective of the ISP, the internet service provider. I mean, does a business have a right to establish its own prices and deliverables based on demand or profitability? Do they have a right to that? I mean, when you start a business, whether it's a hardware store or whether it's Google, do you have the right to set your own prices? Do you have the right to tell people what you will give them and for how much? Because that's really what this discussion comes down to in a lot of ways is, is it moral to use government to tell a business what they must provide and how? I say no. I don't think so. I mean, I have run a business, and I'm currently running a business, and there's no way. I don't want government to tell me this is what you must give your consumers and this is how much they will pay for it. That doesn't make any sense. It's not their business. Their necks were not on the line starting this. It's the same story for Comcast and for Verizon. It's the same story for these businesses. These are independent businesses who have the right to do what they want. And each one of their services is outlined and defined by contract law. This is not just willy-nilly, hey, Verizon, do you want to be my friend? I will pay you some money and you just give me what you can when you can. No, this is all outlined in individual contracts. So if you don't like what your provider is giving you, get a different provider or renegotiate your contract. This is something that the market has been doing for thousands and thousands of years. We don't need government to come along and tell the company, and it's not moral for them to do so. Look, I know as consumers we have wants, okay, and the companies want to meet those, but I have no right to tell Comcast what they must do for me beyond my contract, beyond the limits of my contract with them and the transparency of knowing what their prices are and what service I can expect. They don't have to report to me, okay, and they don't have to report to you. Like if they fail to please us, we don't get a vote on their board. We get to vote with our money. And they already honor that. So, I mean, that's how these transactions work. Saying, well, this is going to be better for me as a consumer, therefore the company doesn't have any rights. Well, that's just arrogant, and it's selfish, and it's really one-sided, and it really will only last until you start your own business. And then you'll start thinking about things very differently. Because when it's your own property on the line and other people that you don't know are making decisions based on what's best for them, you'll kind of see where this is coming from. So I don't think as consumers we can afford to neglect looking at it from the other side. And of course, the third element of this is the government. Okay, turning something into a utility doesn't take it out of anyone's control. It just adds government control on top of it. So, if you're the government and you're turning these companies into a utility and you're deputizing them, it's not like Verizon management just goes away. I mean, it's not like Verizon is suddenly, holy and contrite and they want everyone to love each other and have free ponies. I mean, that's not what happens here. You're not taking away any levels of bureaucracy. You're adding it. So what you're going to have is you're going to have, just like with your water utilities, you have a level of management that's profit driven, and then you have a level above that is bureaucracy driven. Neither of these things are good. I mean, at least profit driven gives you the chance to change it with profitability. But bureaucracy driven, there's no way to change that. It gets instilled. And by the way, the 1934 Telecommunications Act that designated these common carriers, that's why we only had 4 major phone companies for decades. There could have been many more. But once they're installed and they're entrenched and they're backed by government, why would anybody else get in? Why would you try to fight that uphill battle? It doesn't make any sense. So we need to look at things from all angles of this. There's a reason that folks who are want more government in every area of your life want net neutrality. They didn't suddenly get a change of heart and they want you to have more freedom on the internet. That's what this is. That's what this is about. They want to have more control of the internet by more than just businesses. And like so many issues of left and right, I mean, it comes down to who do you trust more? Do you trust government or do you trust business? And typically, those of us that are more on the right will lean more toward distrust of government and trust of business, and those on the left will do the reverse. They tend to trust government a lot more, and they tend to distrust businesses. And so one of those things that this is an opportunity to sort of explore that difference and say, okay, what is it about the way that our current internet service providers are acting that makes you so scared that you would want to turn them into your water company? And is that reasonable? And what is that going to do to internet service in the future? If you let that the camel's nose under the tent in that way, what can government then tell you you can and cannot access in the future? If you give them that authority, how exactly are you going to take it away? So, we should be looking at these things from a long-term perspective, not just a short-term perspective. Net neutrality it seems to be going away, or at least the Title II reclassification seems to be going away. I think the principle will live on. And it's not because the government says that companies have to. It's because companies who treat you badly, just like a mechanic or anyone else, a company that treats you badly, you're going to leave them. I think the real discussion needs to be focused on how do we remove the barriers to entry? How do we get around these, corporate deals that have entrenched these current ISPs and get more people into the market so that we can have more options and more customization. Thanks for listening. That's all we have for the Right Moment podcast today. Check back next week. We're going to have great new stuff coming for you. There's so much to talk about this time of year. Oh my gosh. There's just, even if it wasn't the holidays, there's just so much going on. Have an amazing week. Have a thankful week. Go out there and change the world. Hey, if you were waiting for the right moment, that was it.